Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here, and this time around I want to talk about the #1 cause for soft or blurry images with wildlife photography. Not only is this problem exceedingly common, what really makes it insidious is that it flies under the radar all the time and is often misdiagnosed as a lens or focus problem when it's really not. And the truth is, you've almost certainly been a victim of it. The #1 sharpness killer? Heat refraction, also called heat distortion or heat haze. In fact, here in the Serengeti, it's on the most wanted list for killing image sharpness. Heat refraction is constantly overlooked and is easily the most common reason for a soft image. In fact, if you're getting soft images with no readily apparent reason, heat refraction is the first thing you should consider. And this video will make you an expert on what it is, where it's likely to occur, and how to prevent it. What is heat refraction? If you've ever looked down a long road on a hot summer day and saw heat waves shimmering off the surface in the distance, you've witnessed a prime example of heat refraction. Those heat waves are caused by the hot road heating up the air right at the surface. As it heats, it rises into the cooler air above, and we start seeing refracting of the light due to the different air densities of the hot air and the cold air. When you try to shoot through this refracted light, you end up with images that are soft, out of focus, and mushy looking, just like this giraffe. However, you don't need a hot day for this to happen. That's the first mistake people make. All you need are 2 different air temperatures to mix, and that can happen in any temperature. In fact, I think this is almost worse in cold weather than in warm weather. 3 ways to spot heat refraction. The first and easiest way is if you could actually see the heat waves rising. And no, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, but it is an effective way to tell. The second telltale is jittery AF. If you shoot an AFC, as most wildlife photographers do, you'll often find the AF system is a bit uncertain and jittery if you're dealing with heat refraction. Third is just to learn to recognize the conditions when it's likely to be present. The truth is, heat refraction is often subtle enough that the only sign we might be dealing with it is that the conditions are right and our images are mysteriously soft. We'll go over those conditions next, and you know what? I think the last one might actually surprise you. The most common problem: open areas. Although it would be nice, heat refraction isn't limited to our roadway example. Pretty much anywhere you have an open area with the sun beating down, you can run into this type of heat refraction. In fact, I just assume it's going to be an issue if I see an animal across an open area with the sun beating down on it. For wildlife shooters, we're mostly talking about open meadows, fields, rocky terrain, lawns, deserts, sand dunes, beaches. You get the idea. Basically, any open area exposed to the sun. Also, water is not exempt here and is, in fact, sometimes even worse than over the ground. Remember, all that's required for heat refraction to occur is air of 2 different temperatures to mix together, and water can affect the temperature of the air directly above it just as easily as the ground can. Plus, our long lenses exacerbate the problem. See, when you strap on a long lens to photograph an animal out in an open area on a sunny day, it optically compresses those heat waves, causing severely soft images. Additionally, trying to autofocus through it can be amazingly difficult since the refraction makes it seem like the subject's distance isn't steady. And this doesn't just apply to big glass like a 600mm. Any focal length can actually show it, but it's really most noticeable when you start getting over the 150 to 200mm range. Also, it's much worse at a distance than it is up close, since the farther away the subject is, the more refracted light you're shooting through. Naturally, this doesn't occur every time you're over an open area, but if you've ever had the experience of photographing an animal in an open meadow and were left wondering why it wasn't sharp, heat refraction is the most likely culprit. Sadly, mitigation here is limited. Shooting during the golden hours can help since the sun isn't as intense. I rarely have issues with heat refraction during those times of day. Along those same lines, overcast can effectively put an end to heat refraction as well, as long as it's been around for a while. A passing cloud ain't gonna cut it. It also helps to be as close as safely possible to your subject. The farther away you are, the worse heat refraction is gonna be. It also helps to avoid open sunlit areas. I know, this isn't always easy, but open sunlit areas are ideal breeding grounds for heat refraction. My rule of thumb is to expect to deal with some degree of heat refraction if I'm shooting over any kind of open area, if it's more than like an hour after sunrise or before sunset. In short, sometimes you really are in a no-win scenario, and it's best to retreat to the shade of the forest and search for targets there. In fact, sometimes animals up in trees are actually less affected by heat refraction since they're a bit higher above the ground. As a final cautionary note, wind can also prove problematic. It's not uncommon to have a breeze with various temperatures woven into it, causing these same kinds of issues. The trick with a varying temperature breeze is that it can also invade our normally safe, shaded or overcast areas, so be on the lookout. Problem area 2, cars. Shooting from a car is another common way to run into heat refraction. Most of the time, this happens when shooting in cold weather. We have a nice warm car, we're all snug and cozy in there, we see a tempting target, we roll down the window, and we shoot and nothing is sharp. Why? When the heat from the car escaped the windows, it bathed your equipment in all sorts of temperature differentials that caused massive heat refraction. The fix here is simple. When shooting from a vehicle, turn off the climate control, roll down the windows, and keep the inside the same temperature as the outside. Just remember that even if the temperature is equalized between the car and the outside world, you can still fall victim to heat refraction if you're shooting over something like, you guessed it, an open sunlit meadow. Also, that's not the end of it for cars. Shooting around the car is also problematic since the car can give off heat. Although it's tempting to use the car as cover sometimes, if you're too close to the exhaust system or the engine, you may have issues with the heat coming off of those areas. And never, ever, ever, ever shoot over a hot hood. It virtually guarantees a soft photo. I always try to take a few steps away from the car, especially if a breeze is blowing heat from the car to my location. Problem area 3, buildings and houses. Along the same line as vehicles, we have shooting out of our homes. Sometimes you'll have a well-placed feeder near the house, so it seems like opening the window to photograph some of the little visitors on a cold day might prove fun. However, the problem is the same as with a warm car. We get a ton of warm air rolling out and ruining our images. Buildings themselves can also be a troublesome source of heat refraction. Often they are eager to soak in the heat from the sun and in turn happy to radiate that out into the nearby cool air. In addition, if there's an air conditioner condenser unit, a furnace vent, a dryer vent, anything like that, anywhere near where you're shooting, feel free to think of those as heat refraction generators. Problem area 4, lens hoods. Finally, the sneakiest one of all, lens hoods. The hood on our lenses can create tube currents when the air inside the hood is different from that on the outside of it. This is usually the result of taking a warm lens out into the cold with the lens hood attached. The front element warms the air directly in front of it, and that mixes with the cold air coming in from the front of the hood. The result, you end up with localized heat refraction right inside that lens hood. In fact, here's a thermal photo taken just a minute after taking a warm lens outside. Note how the front element is still nice and toasty, but you can see the heat gradation as you move towards the front of the lens. In fact, here's another example. I took these photos in 1 degree Fahrenheit temps with the lens at room temperature. The soft one is with the lens hood on, the sharp one is without it. I tried this multiple times with multiple systems and lenses and always had the same result. To avoid this issue, allow your lens to acclimate and to drop to the same temperature as the outside air. Once it does, the issue will disappear. Of course, you may not always be able to allow the lens to acclimate, so in those cases, remove your lens hood until the gear drops to the proper temperature. Just exercise caution since the front element is now far more vulnerable. As soon as the gear acclimates, go ahead and get that lens hood right back in place.
So I'm back from the Serengeti and I realized I left one thing out. A question that comes up all the time with heat refraction is, can you fix it in post? And the answer is usually not. Now, if it's just a little minor bit of softening, yeah, maybe you can sharpen that back and get a usable photo. However, if it's like low and up, like low, moderate, or high, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to fix it. And I tell people to think of it like this. Imagine you're shooting through a dirty pane of glass and you just can't get sharp images through it. That's what's happening with heat refraction. There's a physical barrier between you and the subject that's causing softness, and there's just no way to fix it in post.
I hope this has helped, and if you enjoy learning tips and techniques like this, make sure to check out all of my educational materials as well. Each is loaded with field-tested advice to help you to get the most from your next outing. Also, make sure you stop by the site and sign up for my free email newsletter so you never miss a tip. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.